Good afternoon and welcome. Really exciting to see such a full room, ready to explore some great topics, exploring our conversation about the next generation. Thank you all for coming. My name is Colin Brine, and I'm on the Strategic Engagement and Planning team with the PUD, and I'll be facilitating a bit just to keep things rolling today, but most of the action will be done by you. Up on the screen, and it's one of the first sheets in your binder, is a little bit an outline of what we're going to cover today. It's in three sections here. The first section, we're going to get to know each other, introduce ourselves, and then we're going to get to hear from our general manager, Steve Wright, who's going to talk about what this conversation means and this new endeavor, this engagement and planning process, what it's about and why. And then from there, we're going to go through and walk you through the materials and things you need to know as topic teams to get started. And then finally, we're going to turn you loose and let your team leaders work with you on getting started and some key things that you're going to need to decide and get going before you leave today. So we're going to do that all in 90 minutes or less, and it's going to be a really good time. So to have some introductions to start with, what I'd like to ask is each of the teams here has a team leader. And you're probably all familiar with that person because they invited you to come and had a conversation with them. I wonder if I could ask the team leader to, we'll go around the room and I'll ask you to introduce yourself and your role at the PUD and just a quick synopsis about what your team is about, your topic is about. And just the team leader, you don't have to introduce your team members, but Ben's going to come around with the microphone and if we could have each of the leaders introduce themselves, we'll get started that way. Thank you.
First. Good afternoon. Excuse me, Mike Coleman, Managing Director of Fiber and Telecom. I have the Fiber topic team, and our objective is to get some clarity and some recommendations on a sustainable fiber program.
Hi, I'm Greg Carrington. I'm Managing Director of Energy Resources, and our topic team is Economic Development, and we also have Electrification topic team as well. The concentration for us is going to be looking at all things that the PUD does as far as contributing to the local economy. Given the constraints and the authority of the PUD, we're going to be investigating ways that the PUD can reinvest in the community that would stimulate economic growth to the extent that people want to see economic growth.
Kelly?
So I apologize if my back is to you. I'm Kelly Boyd. I'm the Chief Financial and Risk Officer. Our topic team is Reinvest in the Business. And our focus is really on, in order to provide extra benefits to some of these other topics, we first need to take care of our own assets in order to generate those benefits. So we'll be looking at prioritizing what are the most important things for us to do to maintain our important assets, and those assets are both our physical assets and our people.
I don't know Jim White. Is Jim White? Oh, you took care of that. Okay, Kirk.
Good afternoon. Kirk Hudson, Managing Director of Generation and Transmission. Our topic team is Parks and Recreation. We've heard loud and clear that the community greatly values the parks that the PUD owns. We have 14 parks in all. We're at a critical milestone in the life of our parks. A lot of them were developed 25 years ago. And so we've got a great opportunity to look at how we're currently using our park system and what options we have for the future. So looking forward to exploring the options with our customer owners.
Good afternoon. John Stoll. I'm Managing Director of Customer Utilities at the PUD. I'm the lead for our water, wastewater topic team. Very similar to Mike Coleman and Fiber. We're looking to have recommendations for a sustainable and durable operating financial plan for those two systems. So again, thank you for coming.
Talk about your support topic.
Oh, sure. So good afternoon. My name is Eric Walquist. I'm General Counsel for the PUD, and my team here, Karen Wiggum, who's a staff attorney, and Carol Wardell, who's a staff attorney. We're here to provide support for all of the topic teams. So there are 3 of us. We're going to cut ourselves in half and try to make it around to each of you. So if you have any questions about any of that or anything that comes up, please raise your hand, wave us over, and we'll just sort of mingle throughout the room and provide whatever assistance we can. Thanks for coming. I hope it'll be fun.
Kelly, do you want to talk about finance? As a support topic? Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly Boyd, again. And we also, interspersed through all the groups, have financial experts for providing expertise to each of the groups as you work through all your ideas, just to check in on financial answers to anything you might have to keep you going on your brainstorming.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Allison Brodeen, and I'm the interim managing director for the HR and safety departments. I'm in a support role with an internal team that's focused on employee engagement and outreach within the company to bring ideas back to the reinvestment committee or the reinvestment team to think about ways that we can reinvest in employees to sustain the business.
That's everyone, right? Excellent. Well, next I'd like to share a video with you. And as you enjoy the video, I'd like in particular to think about what you appreciate and enjoy about the quality of life and living we have in Chelan County, and think about how that projects forward to long-range thinking and about our vision for the next generation. So we'll play this, and then we'll be able to reflect on that. So here we go.
What is quality of life? What does quality of life mean to you? Is it living in a special place? Is it the people who surround us? Is it having the power to shape our own lives? When I think of quality of life, I think of Chelan County. Here in Chelan County, we live right on the edge of the wild. Miles of quilted orchards snuggle up against hillsides flooded with balsam root and sunshine. From our deep blue waters, breathtaking mountains rise up on every side. Chelan County is a place for exploring. It's a place for all seasons, a place for getting out and going out. This is a place where families grow, friendships form, and fun is seldom more than a few minutes away. Together we have planted orchards and built cities and towns. We have created businesses and jobs, homes, families, and safe communities, caring communities where we know each other's names. In Chelan County, we have priceless parks, thriving orchards and vineyards, and exciting new technologies. We have passionate doctors and nurses, teachers who put their hearts into their work, and vibrant arts and cultures. And what powers this quality of life? Is it the majestic natural beauty that surrounds us? Is it the sunshine bringing life to our fields? Is it the powerful waters driving our dams? Is it the abundant, affordable electricity we all enjoy? Or is it the people? It was people half a century ago who invested in our quality of life today by building our hydroelectric dams. It is people, family, friends, and neighbors who take care of those assets for the good of everyone. It is the people who live here who turn electricity into culture and jobs and health and happiness. Chelan County is powered by people, and it will be people like you and me who invest in the future of this county for the next generation. Because quality of life isn't just about how great my life is, it's about how I can make life great for others. Together, we have the power to shape the future, This is our moment. The next generation of Chelan County is in our hands. How will we invest in the future?
The narrative in this video is inspired by 19 middle schoolers from around the county who wrote their own essays about that very question, and some of their great quotes are at the end of the video here, which you can enjoy as we're segueing into the next section. So it's my pleasure now to introduce the general manager of our PUD, Steve Wright.
So thank you. Thanks for taking the time. Wait a second. I got to turn this on. My first rule. All right. Can you hear me in the back? Yep. So thank you for taking the time to join us. This is a very important exercise to us, and we very much want your input, and we appreciate the fact that you're spending your afternoon, a beautiful afternoon, here with us. As many of you know, I'm relatively new here to the county. Just got here in September, trying on the role here of understanding what it's like to be the general manager. I have spent 30 years in the electric utility business, and so I know a lot about electric utilities, and I will tell you that one of the things that brought me here, probably the major thing that brought me here, was just how cool it is to have a utility like this. That a county of this size, relatively modest size, would have generating assets of this magnitude and producing this kind of value, and the opportunity that creates to be able to serve the public interest that comes along with that is daunting to me, actually. It's a really, really great opportunity, and I'm hoping that we're able to work something out over the course of the next year or two where we're able to capture the value that's generated by these fabulous assets, and through your input, be able to define how that value should best be used to fuel the next generation. So we have a great legacy, an unbelievable legacy that's been created here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that, about just how amazing it is. And now the opportunity is, so what legacy would we like to leave behind? This strategic planning process is like many. It is built around a few key facts. The first is you start with situational awareness, sort of what do we have, and how does it set us up for the future. It moves to threats and opportunities that are created for the business. And then it finishes with, so what's kind of the key strategic question that we get to deal with, and what issues we'll be addressing as part of this process. So I'm going to walk you through that. Those of you who joined us last week at TEDx, I apologize. It's a bit of a repeat, but I hope you'll still get something out of this, and I hope there's enough information here that it's still fresh. And I hope you'll also be thinking about, so how do I use this information as a participant in one of the topic teams that will be addressing the key issues that we see confronting us. So first of all, any utility is really judged on the basis of four factors: rates, reliability, environmental stewardship, and being accountable to the people you serve. And on those four measures, Chelan PUD is really an amazing place. In fact, it has to be one of the premier utilities in the country. So on a rates basis, I think everybody here knows that our rates are low, but do you know how low they are? So essentially 1/4 the national average and 1/3 the statewide average here in Washington State. And that's despite the fact that Washington State has either the lowest or the second lowest rates in the country based on Energy Information Administration data. So these are really, really low rates, amazingly low rates, and they give this county a huge competitive advantage, both for industry's perspective, and it also means more disposable income in people's pockets. We have really pretty high reliability. This is not an easy service territory. When you look at distribution utilities around the country, we are relatively rural, which means relatively low density, harder to serve, really pretty rough terrain, weather conditions that can be extreme. So this is a tough service territory, and yet despite that, the reliability measures easily somewhere at the bottom of the first, top of the second quartile for utilities around the country. From an environmental stewardship standpoint, the major environmental issues that utilities around the country are confronted with is the fact that 40% of greenhouse gas emissions are produced by the electricity sector. As we seek to address climate change, where utilities are forced to address how are they using thermal, fossil fuel-fired plants to produce electricity. So that means that they're trying to shut down coal and natural gas plants, replace them with other resources that are generally more expensive. We are a virtually greenhouse gas emission-free resource. So it gives us a huge competitive advantage on a going forward basis. Our big challenge is, of course, fish and wildlife, because a hydro system has a huge impact on fish and wildlife resources. This utility made an amazing decision 12 years ago to invest in a habitat conservation plan. Because what that did was it said there are certain requirements under the Endangered Species Act that have to be met. And the utility said we're going to go above and beyond those requirements, not meet what's called the jeopardy to the continued existence of the species, the standard in ESA. Go beyond that and create no net impact to the fish. That in fact the operation of the dams would lead to no net impact to fish and wildlife. Well, that was an amazing decision, and the federal government, when it saw that, said, well, if you're willing to do this habitat conservation plan, we'll give you additional commitments in terms of no surprises going forward. But you have to check in every so often to make sure you're actually doing what you said you would do. And last year at a 10-year check-in, the federal agency said the utility is meeting all of its commitments and meeting the biological performance standards that were embedded in the habitat conservation plan. From a customer satisfaction standpoint, we did a survey earlier this year. We benchmarked against roughly 50 other similarly situated utilities across the country, and we ended up in the top 15th percentile of customers, 92% of the customers being satisfied or very satisfied. Now, I will admit I was a little surprised. I thought, well, it must be because of our low rates. Actually, of the 8% who were not satisfied or very satisfied, about half said our rates were too high. So apparently we still have a challenge to go in that regard. But folks were very happy with a variety of things, including not just rates, but reliability and other factors. So the fact of the matter is we start from a really good place. There's opportunities for improvement. Being in the top 15% doesn't mean you're not at the very top. So one of our goals is to strive for being the best utility in the country. Situational awareness would also force you to look at, in any business, so where does your revenue come from and what's the strength of that revenue stream. We're in 4 businesses. I think most folks know we're in the electricity business, the water, wastewater, and fiber businesses. But if you add the blue and the red slices of this pie together, which are the wholesale electric business and the retail electric business, roughly 95% of our revenue comes from electricity. Only a relatively small share, 5% of our revenue, comes from the fiber, water, and wastewater businesses. And that reflects the fact that this business is driven fundamentally by the big hydroelectric projects. So 3 big projects, Rocky Reach, Rock Island, Lake Chelan, producing power at roughly $15 a megawatt hour. That may not mean much to you, but somebody who's been in the utility industry for a long time, that's like an amazing number. You can't buy resources in the Western electricity markets for probably less than about $60 a megawatt hour. People are buying them for in excess of $100. When you have power at $15 a megawatt hour, you have a huge economic advantage. And then on top of that, we have power roughly 5 times the amount that we need to serve the county's load. So we sell 80% of our power outside the county, going to other places, selling it at rates above our cost. We pull that revenue back and then use it to lower rates here in the county. So it creates a huge amount of value for the county. Big assets like that, though, take big capital investments. And so there are some very big capital investments that have been made here, especially for a county of this size. This is a comparison that we did looking at the amount of debt per retail customer. So just think about that for a second. You are a retail customer, so each one of you is on the hook for paying this amount of debt. Today, it's roughly about $15,000 per retail customer, so big projects, big investment. A similarly situated utility out there across the rest of the country would have debt roughly around $3,000 per retail customer. So we have about 5 times the amount of debt that the average utility out there would have per customer. So that's a significant exposure to us. Right? It works fine as long as the assets are operating and running and they're producing power at that $15 a megawatt hour. But if there were a problem out there, that would be an exposure for us. So it's something that needs to get addressed. And I'm really glad I got here and it was already being addressed. So the board, in its infinite wisdom, has already made decisions that have caused us to move from having debt that was roughly a little over $1 billion back in 2000, and this is years across the bottom with dollars up the left-hand side. The high-end mark is in excess of $1 billion of debt. We've been coming down since then. We're at roughly $750 million down, and based on a decision the board made a couple of weeks ago, We're on a path towards bringing that down to about $350 million by the 2020 timeframe. So that, I have to say, seems like a really good thing. And again, I did a lot of due diligence before coming here, and one of my concerns was the amount of debt, and it made me a lot more comfortable to know that the path we were on was trying to reduce the amount of debt that the utility carries. Okay, threats and opportunities. They fall into a couple of categories. When you have big assets like this, big valuable assets like this, then you have a series of threats and opportunities that are associated with those assets. You want to make sure that you take great care of them. You want them to last. We have certainly become aware that things can happen to dams. Something has happened to one downstream. We believe that it's very unlikely that that same situation would occur on our hydroelectric facilities, but the fact of the matter is they weren't expecting to have happen what happened to them at Grant County PUD and Wanapum Dam. So one has to be aware that there's always the risk of that, and one wants to make sure that you're making investments to try to avoid any of those kinds of risks. On the other hand, there's also opportunity. Hydro projects are really, really valuable projects in Western electricity markets, especially as we try to address greenhouse gas emissions. And so investments in these resources that can increase the amount of output of the projects create value for the county and value for all of you as residents of the county. We have some big changes coming in electricity markets and changes that are primarily driven by public policy initiatives. In this industry, the primary driver of cost structure is no longer the decisions that we make inside the utility. The primary driver of cost structure is mostly driven by regulatory and legislative initiatives. So we have proposals with respect to changing the way we operate the system in order to address air emissions issues, a lot of additions to wind and solar across the Western electric markets. That has an impact on us. If we're selling 80% of our power into Western electric markets and we're dependent on the price that comes out of those, if you add a lot of supply into the marketplace, it changes the price that people get. And some of these resources are direct competitors against ours. So these big changes that are coming in terms of renewable portfolio standards or even placing a price on carbon emissions do have an impact on the price that we can generate. Sometimes it's a good impact and it can drive the price up, and sometimes it's a negative price and negative impact and it drives the price down. We also have other initiatives that come out of Washington, D.C. So we operate under the Columbia River Treaty, an agreement with the Canadians as to how streamflows will come across the border. Signed in 1964 and agreed that it would stay in place until at least 2024. It can be terminated on 10 years' notice by either the U.S. or the Canadian government. So guess what? 10 years' notice is 2014 for a 2024 potential termination, and the first date that comes due is in September of this year. So now we're into a position of potentially renegotiating the Columbia River Treaty with a lot of partners around the region and with our friends in Washington, D.C. and Canada, and that will impact the stream flows that come downstream. And when you're a hydro utility, when the water comes downstream, has a huge impact on how much value you can generate from these projects. Certain times it comes down, the projects have little to no value. Other times it comes down, has extremely high value. So we have some threats and opportunities there that we're seeking to manage and try to turn the threats into opportunities. We put all this stuff together, and if there is one thing that you take away from today, I hope it'll be this graphic, because it's the biggest challenge that we have as a utility going forward. This is a description of our forecast of our economic circumstances, the net of revenues and expenses over the course of the next 15 years. And there are two lines up there. Now, that doesn't mean there's only two futures that we can forecast. There are thousands of futures that we can forecast, and we just try to summarize that into a couple of different lines to give you a sense of what the big challenges are. So imagine 1,000 lines of spaghetti up there, all going in different directions, and then just say, okay, so now we've summarized that into an expected scenario. And the expected scenario is one that we think has a 50% probability of being above that line and a 50% probability of being below that line. So we'll call that the blue line. And you can see that in that forecast, in which we're assuming no rate increases for the next 15 years, I have to pause on that for a second, because I got to tell you, the rest of my colleagues in the electric utility industry, I don't even tell them that we're forecasting no rate increases for the next 15 years under our expected scenario. Most of them are forecasting anywhere to 5 to 8% rate increases, well above consumer price index and rate increases over the course of the next 10 to 15 years. So we're saying the expected value forecast is no rate increase, and that we would buy down debt, as indicated before. We would be pulling down the debt from the $750 million to the $350 million range, and even with that, the utility produces more revenue than it has costs. Okay, so that sounds really good, right? Great scenario, but we always have to remember that we're not that good as human beings at forecasting economic conditions. So we need to be thinking about the range of scenarios that could occur, and that leads us to the brown line below. The brown line is a less probable scenario, but not implausible. It basically takes three circumstances into account. It assumes that there were low stream flows for the next 10 years. Not so extraordinary that it's never happened. It's the lowest 10 years of stream flow that we've seen, so it has happened in the past. It assumes that our costs are higher, that the regulatory structures that come out of Olympia and Washington, D.C. are just different from what we've anticipated, and it drives up our costs above and beyond what we're currently anticipating. And it assumes that the market price is lower. So again, this 80% of our power we're selling into wholesale markets, it's completely dependent on what that wholesale market price is. And so the question is, what will that price be? And if you had a substantial influx of new resources, a lot of supply into the marketplace, if natural gas prices were to stay low for the coming years, the shale gas revolution that's being experienced around the country, then we'd see low gas prices. Leads to low electric prices in Western wholesale markets. A lot of gas is used to make electricity. So you put those three things together, and we end up in a situation where within 4 to 5 years, we're struggling to get by without rate increases of some kind. So again, not the likely scenario, but a plausible scenario. So the biggest challenge in our strategic planning process is when you have two scenarios like that, how do you manage for both scenarios? What we're going to do is we're planning to try to be conservative based on direction from the board, trying to be conservative and assume that the brown line is possible, continue to buy down debt, which gives us more flexibility, puts us in a better position to be able to address declining revenues or increasing costs. And yet at the same time, we're going to go through an exercise and talk about, well, what happens if the blue line comes true? What happens if we are fortunate enough that we actually are able to produce more revenue than we have costs? And since that these assets are owned by the people of the county, then the question becomes, what's the will of the people of the county in terms of how those revenues could be used to make investments, and hopefully in the same kind of way that were made by our forefathers that produced this incredibly valuable assets that are now producing lots of value that's available to us to take advantage of. And therein lies your task. So over the course of the last 9 months, I've spent a lot of time meeting with the board and with our management team, employees, wandering around the county, meeting with people here, and trying to get a sense of what are the issues that are most on people's mind. And that has resulted in trying to put together this set of topic teams, which you are now participating in. The idea was to take the things that we might be able to do, again, if the blue line comes true, and I keep underscoring the if the blue line comes true, where we might be able to make investments that could create value for the longer term for the county. And those teams are the ones that you've heard a little bit about. So what more could we do with respect to our parks? What can we do in the water and wastewater arena and fiber, where we have the opportunities to make investments in infrastructure? What can we do with electrification? We have this incredibly low-cost asset. It's available potentially to be used as a substitute supply for other fuel sources. The most obvious alternative there is electric vehicles, but there are others potentially where we could find ways to use electrification as an alternative fuel supply. Economic development. Is there something that we might do with respect to how we use low-cost electricity to attract industry into this area and be able to generate more income, more property tax values, things that will help to enhance the quality of life for the people who live here? And then reinvesting in the business. And I hope this one won't get short shrift. I have to say it's near and dear to my heart because clearly there was a great strategy 40, 50 years ago to invest in this business in order to create value for the long term. And we want to make sure that we don't just use up that value, but we're actually investing for the future as well and assuring that these great assets can continue to provide value for the county for decades into the future. So that's why you're here. is to be able to have this conversation. The way we've tried to set this up is that we wanted to be able to have a conversation about each one of these areas, and then each one of these topic teams would produce a set of options that are generated by people from within the county about things that we might be able to implement, different options for how we might invest in fiber, or how we might invest in water and wastewater. That range of options we're going to try to do some economic evaluation around. And that economic evaluation is we are going to try to do, and I have to say this is relatively new for us, so we're going to learn as we go here. We're going to try to figure out ways that we can do it that don't just consider the impact on the utility, but try to consider the impact on the county. So for example, on economic development, if we attract a new industry here, we're currently selling that power in the wholesale markets for about $40 a megawatt hour. We sell it to an industry here, we're selling it at maybe $15 or $20 a megawatt hour. So there's a loss in revenue there that impacts the utilities finances. But it may be that there's enough value created from that in terms of income, property taxes, et cetera, that the value to the county would exceed the loss to the utility. So that's the way we're going to try to come at this conversation. Again, I don't promise it'll be perfect. This is very hard economic evaluation to do. Macroeconomic evaluation like this is not something that just rolls out quickly. But we're going to take a shot and see if we can get a sense at least of how these values are traded off against each other. Your goal, your task, is to try to come up with these options, look at them, look at the evaluation, provide some sense as to what is a fair range of options that should be presented going forward. We hope to finish that by roughly the September, maybe early October timeframe, and then that will roll up the next step to another group of folks from across the community. We'll look at all these options, and my guess is that it will be unlikely we could do them all, and try to set some priorities about, okay, what creates the greatest and most value for people of the county. I want to make sure that we set the expectations right here. I don't expect that we're going to walk out of this process, both this first process and the later process of prioritization, and immediately decide that there's tons of dollars that can be spent. Let's just start spending money. This is really a long-term process. I expect it to take years, ultimately, before we get to full implementation. What I hope is that we'll set some priorities about these are the kinds of things that we want to be thinking about as a county. Maybe we can make some investments in some planning studies and those kinds of things. We're trying to put ourselves in the position so as we're trying to figure out, are we on the brown line or the blue line? If we're on the brown line, we get off. And I say that in all candor because I want to make sure you know the assignment as we go in. If we're on the brown line, I hate to say it, but this exercise is mostly for naught. There will not be dollars to spend if we're on the brown line. If we're on the blue line, though, we're trying to put ourselves in a position so we're ready and that we could make good decisions and that we're not just all of a sudden going, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And we start spending and we don't have a thoughtful process associated with that. So I hope that makes sense as to why we're going about it the way we are, and I hope you're still intrigued and wanting to be a participant in this process. As we walk through this, I'll just leave you with this final thought. It's the one criteria that we're trying to use as we go through the process, and that is, so we're a bit of an unusual entity in that most people wouldn't say, if you ask them, where are you from, they wouldn't say Chelan County, right? You'd say, as most of Americans would say, I'm from Wenatchee, I'm from Leavenworth, I'm from Chelan. And yet, our statutory authority derives from the fact that we are a county-based entity. And so the issue is, how do we think about what's best for the county as a whole? And so the mantra that we've been using is the best in terms of the best value that we can create for the most people for the longest period of time, thinking about that from a county-wide perspective. So best for the most for the longest is the criteria that we're giving our economic evaluation team to consider the options as they come forward, and that's the test that we'll be trying to put on this. All right, that's what I wanted to share with you. Colin, do you want to jump into the next phase?
Yes, thank you very much, Steve. Could you go launch that again? What I'd like to do next is walk through the binders with you. The team has worked hard, and the teams and the team leaders and so forth have worked hard to anticipate everything you would need to be awesome in this endeavor. So this is your toolkit to start with, giving you the right things you need and the right things to know to start with, and places to put more things in as you travel this journey. So we're going to walk through that and help you understand what's in there and how you can use that to your advantage. In a minute, we'll have it up on screen here. There's a sheet in there that talks about a public conversation about the future, and Steve just alluded to what that's about and why it's so important. In particular, why this is a big moment to think about the future and the next generation, much like those that came before us did, to put it in the place we are today. So that's a little bit of context, and you might find that valuable to read, and in particular to share with others. You're going to be not only working in your teams, but you're going to be interacting with family members, friends, social groups, and a lot of the work that you'll do outside of the teams will be conversational with them and exploring and understanding how they see particular options and assets and resources and possibility. Let's see here if I got it. Nope. I can go on the... See if we can get Debbie in here. Apparently when the screen went up on its own, it disconnected my device here. The next sheet is the slide that Steve had up that had the teams and a review of the process, the colored one in there. And I want to draw attention to a couple of things on there. See if I can plug this in. Maybe it'll work that way. There. We'll go with the wired version instead of the wireless. So what we have here is an explosion of the topic teams. So the topic teams are a really vital, important interface in the entire conversation that we're having. Steve alluded to the task at hand, and your ability to explore the options in each of those topics, really critical, shown here in each of the colors and so forth. Left to right is a timeline. You may have noticed that too, and you can see, particularly when you're lit up, you're fully on and engaged, and then when it's a little grayed out, other things are happening in the process. Across the top is the overall strategy and the oversight by the commissioners and Steve. And there's going to be a general public conversation, a whole community county conversation happening that parallels the track as you look over time. So here's the time here. We're in the mid-June. This process is happening June to September. So while you're doing the work of exploring options, we're going to be engaging our whole county customer owners in conversation about their vision for the next generation, about the quality of life, and about the influence our PUD has on that. And as we move out further from county vision beyond role of PUD, we're going to move to the public preferences period, where the public will and our customer owners will be able to weigh in on the same choices that you will help have informed by that time. There's also another group traveling and helping guide this process called strategy partners. And at the culmination of your work, as we get to the end of September, you're going to be presenting these options as you've curated them towards we get to the end. And the strategy partners will then begin to weigh in with those, and eventually they'll go to the board for final prioritization. But by that time, we'll have had topic teams, we'll have had strategy partners, we'll have the board involved, our whole county involved in the conversation. So it's really a big moment from that standpoint. The other thing is this is creating these conversations are creating a bow wave about thinking about the vision we have for our county. So there's a lot of stakeholders that will be able to benefit from the work that you and others will be doing. So not only can we encourage them to participate because it'll help our PUD and what we'll see about what we envision for the next generation, but many other organizations and across our county will be able to also inform their planning as a result. So we hope this will be a real good benefit for everyone. We have the direct topics here. You also heard before we had some of the supporting teams introduce themselves, and Jeff Smith, that you didn't get to introduce yourself. Jeff is overseeing the entire outreach process, so every aspect of all of this, along with all the things that have been happening up to this point and beyond. So Kelly Boyd has the finance, and Allison is human resources. By the way, there's also a conversation happening throughout and with all the employees, and Allison is the bridge between that and our whole county conversation. So that's another interface that's really important to this. Eric, you heard from a little bit before with Statute Authority, and Kirk with Rediscover Your PUD, which is an effort over the course of specifically of these summer months to really allow people in a fun way to enjoy and celebrate all that our PUD is with a series of activities and information education events at the hydros and in parks. So you can see those pieces. The last thing I'll mention is you'll notice that we've done a lot of work to make sure every aspect of this is done with our community, with our customer owners. So these teams were designed to be internal and external, so you can see the composition. So this is a good tool for you to not only understand, but it's a good tool to help you communicate with others too. There's a lot on here that gives you an idea about all that's going on. The next sheet in here is the timeline, more specifically now to the topic teams and what you can expect. We're on a 3-month, basically, timeline here. July, August, September. And in here you'll see items that are gray and that are red. So the items that are gray are what's happening when you're not meeting. And the items that are red are when you convene and come together. So we're actually in the process of the launch. We didn't put that on here, but the launch is the beginning of this process. And as we go forward from here, you're going to go into the ideate phase. So you and your leaders are going to talk about what it means to ideate. And that actually is a word before you leave here today. The July workshop, which you'll work with your team leaders to schedule and convene on, is about meeting to collect and explore the full array of potential options. So thinking about, as you leave here today, about possibility and about the kind of ideas that will inform your topic are really key. There is, we'll have help, as Steve mentioned before, the ideas and the eventual choices and priorities have to come within both the license and the statutory authority. So Eric and his team are here to help us understand that and get a better appreciation for that, how that plays into the choices we might make. That said, as team members, I think your job is to try to open up the realm of possibility as much as you can within the framework. And if we know where the box is, it's to go out all to the far corners of it. So we want to be on the side of more towards possibility, and we will channel it down. But it's good to understand where those lines are and how important the licensing and statutory authority comes into play. And I know it's been a real interesting education that I've really enjoyed learning about that. I didn't understand all that, so hopefully you'll appreciate it as well. Moving up beyond the populate into the study, then you're going to be able to divvy up the options, gather information to assist with validating, compare, look at equitable distributions, cost, expectation, scale, and time frame. Then in August, you'll begin to narrow it down, begin to select those that may make more sense to you. I'll say at the outset, the goal of this is not to come to a particular conclusion. It's to explore the realm of options from what does it look like when there's more, what does it look like if it was continued the same, and what it would look like if it was less, going to the full spectrum. And to explore that in the context of, you might get into areas of equity. As we said from the beginning, the mantra is the best for the most for the longest period of time. So that's what we're looking for in context. As you move to September, we're getting to a finalization of a work product. So you're going to be curating your array of ideas and moving it into a presentation form so that by the time we get to the October meeting, you'll be able to present it before the strategy partners and the board in a, having done all your work and all your interactions over the course of the meetings. So that's what the timeline looks like. And you'll work with your leaders here shortly to look at what that meeting schedule might look like. It's up to you and your team to figure out how you accomplish those. The other thing to note, there's a place in your binder for this, and we will have it. We don't have it yet, but we'll create a more guiding document for each of those red items that will help you understand what the outcome looks like, what the product or the goal that you're trying to achieve as a result of by that period of time in the process. So that's to come, and we'll have that for you before you even get to your first meeting. So you can look for that. The next document in there is the introduction of topic teams. And much of it I've already spoke to, but I think it's a good document, again, to help you understand or perhaps explain it to others when you tell them, yeah, I'm on a topic team. And talks about how they were chosen, what the teams are. But I think the key part that we could share today is this piece at the bottom and the responsibilities. So the responsibility is to explore a full range of options. As I said before, those options include doing more, doing less, or doing similar, both in the near term and the long term. So all of those ranges, more, less, short term, long term, need to be explored. The teams are expected to practice a high level of balance and openness in pursuit of the options for two reasons. The first one is it's impossible to predict the future. In the same power markets, they may bring welcome revenue, might also work against us. Steve made that point really clear. So we have to understand if we're on the brown line, then we're not going to be able to explore these choices. The second point is your PUD is entrusted by the public with doing the best for the longest term here in Chelan County within the financial and legal constraints. That fact makes questions of equity, unity, and sustainability of particular importance when planning for the future. So that's the other thing to keep in mind is that balance. So we're looking for big picture, whole county, long-range thinking, or wide-range thinking. So it's important to know that we're not asking you to advocate for a particular outcome or a particular idea or cause, but again, to give it's not the job of the teams to pick winners. It's the job to give us a full menu of understanding of the choices and options. There's a little note on the top of the next page, the option evaluation criteria. It kind of summarizes that. So what how we evaluate in the end is the net value created, which means enhancement of quality of life, which is the mission, big part of the mission statement, purpose statement of our PUD, equitable distribution over the long term to all residents of Chelan County while operating within existing authority. The best for the most for the longest, so that's what informs that. So that's a good way to refer to that. So what are the responsibilities? They're kind of outlined there, and your team leaders will help you understand that better. There's the meetings mentioned here below. There's the assignments that you might be asked to do in the interim. Some of that might be spending time, as I alluded to earlier, talking with friends, talking with neighbors, talking with family about the very things that you're exploring to get and bring back and harvest those ideas and bring them back. Some team members may be asked to or volunteer to take on particular assignments. Again, that'll be up to the role of the teams and each of you to decide together. We alluded to the meeting schedule. There's this meeting. There there could be 3, or possibly however you divvy up the meetings in the interim with your leaders in the interim, and then the final presentation meeting to do that. So that's an overview of the teams. The last page talks about how will the input be used and shared. They're going to be submitted and presented in a report and presented live to a group of community leaders. Those are the strategy partners. And then in November, December, the public's going to have an opportunity to go online and look at the range of options and also weigh into the conversation that you've helped informed. And beginning in 2015, then based with all this information that we've gathered from this and the community conversations and the strategy partners, the commissioners will be ready to lead the beginning of the strategic planning process, which will take place in the beginning of the new year. There's a sheet in there next about quick facts about topic teams. So that's your quick sheet if you want that. And then beyond that, each of your teams has fact sheets and info sheets with did you knows, background information, key things you'll want to understand and be able to share with others. There's been a lot of work done by the teams themselves to come up with that, to make it in a readily accessible form. And they're going to spend time maybe talking a bit about that with you today before we go. We made sure everybody has every team's fact sheet. So even though you're working on a particular team, we think it's good for you to know what's happening on the other teams too. So you have the full array in your workbooks to go from. So those are all in there. So good? So far, so good? All right. I want to share the website with you. So we've created This is the website, which is ourpublicpower.org. And you'll find the video right at the beginning of it, which you can hide or not. But this is a good place to send your friends to go see that video and enjoy it again. So that's where you'll find it. There'll also be a link to this page on chelanpud.org website as well, so you can get it no matter where you go. But as you're exploring these options, we have the ability to ask everybody to also weigh in digitally. So we have both physical cards, and we have a digital way for people to weigh in here. So you'll see each of these topic teams are represented here, and by clicking on each one, there are ways that people can contribute their ideas. And every time that we've engaged with the public so far, from our big launch last week to meetings that Steve is leading around the county with community leaders, we're asking people to think about those and letting them know this is a way they can contribute early. So this is a simple way that people can begin to contribute ideas early on, and we'll be feeding those to your team leaders for you to supplement the work you're doing. So as these populate and grow, these will be additional resources for you to use as you're doing your work. So there's one for each one here. And again, we have physical cards for those as well. Brings up another point. There, in your binder is a context pamphlet, and it has says our public power, the next generation, which is the theme of this conversation, and it's a really important read. A lot of careful work has gone into framing the conversation that Steve shared a while ago. It's a chance to read about that and spend more time with it, and to really get a full understanding and appreciation of why this, why now, and why this is such a big moment. So that's another piece that is available in there, and that we can get that. And it's also on the website, the chelanpud.org website. You can read it digitally there. Okay, that was a snootful. All right, so let me check in, see what your questions are, see if it makes sense what we've got so far, And once we do that, then I'm going to turn you loose with your teams and let you begin to go to work. So, Carol. That's going to be a problem. It's always good to be in the right room, right? When you're in the right room, but yes. Where they need to go. So, does anybody not know? I mean, I don't know how to identify those that don't know where they're supposed to go, but I know that Tom's supposed to be at the fiber. So. I don't know. Okay, so Jenny doesn't know where she needs to be. Right there. Okay. Anybody else not sure? Fiber is right up here. So you can move there. Oh, nice. Okay. We're not going to go in there. We're just going to open it, right? No, kidding. Just kidding. No, we're going to open these doors, and so we'll be able to spread out a little bit. Anybody else not sure or not with the team they need to be with? I want to make sure that happens. Okay. All right. Well, you know, on behalf of our team, and I want to say this is really amazing and really exciting. I've never seen or been a part of anything like this, the scale of this, the enthusiasm of it. Every time we've visited with anybody about the timing of this, the kind of conversation we're going to have, it's met with overwhelming enthusiasm, and it's just really exciting to be a part of this. And you guys are breaking ground, breaking new trail with what you're about to do here. So I want to say thank you, and I know you're going to rock it. So I'm going to ask Steve maybe to say a couple of words to close us out before we turn into the more chaotic stage, and then we'll move on.
So I want to reiterate Colin's expression of thank you and gratitude for your willingness to participate. I hope you get a sense that there are a lot of people, what I've discovered at the PUD, there are a lot of people who are really dedicated to public service. And this is an opportunity actually to provide public service. And the best way you do that to serve the public interest is to understand the public interest. So this is the key for us in terms of being able to accomplish that mission. I left out one thing, and it's kind of important, so I want to make sure I say it. We are assuming in this process that we will operate within our existing statutory authority. So it's not a wide open whatever the heck we might do. And I say that because we are a creature of state statute, and so if we were going to have a change in statute, it would require a visit to Olympia, and we'd be walking in and talking about the wonderful situation we have and the incredibly low rates and the possibility of producing revenue in excess of costs, and it might create a little bit of electricity envy. And so our thinking is that that might not be the best strategy, and hence we're going to operate within our existing statutory authority. And so there are some limits in terms of where we'll go here. With that, we're ready and raring to go. Bart and Rich, I know where you guys need to go, so I promise to share with you where you're headed next. How are we going to do this? George, are we opening up the doors? Or what do you want to do? Okay, so we'll open up the doors, create a little room, and then let the teams get to work.
I'm Tika Parks. My title is Customer Relations Administrator, but that's sort of in a nutshell. One of the things